Hey everybody, I'm here today to tell you that a crisis will define you. In life, there are likely going to be times in which you will experience a crisis. And when you experience that crisis, if you experience that crisis, you're going to be faced with two things that can happen. That crisis can define you in a good way, or it can completely hinder you in a bad way. But if you allow the crisis to hinder you in a bad way, then the rest of your life will be affected in a negative way. If you allow a crisis to define you in a good way and you actually grow from that crisis, then guess what? Your entire life will become better. And the thing is, we pretty much all experience different forms of a crisis in our life, and we define the term crisis in different ways. For some people, it means something that is this, and for other people, it means something else. I might think that your crisis is a small deal, and something else to me might be a really big deal. But you might think that what I'm considering a crisis is a small deal, and to you, it might mean something else. And that's because we're all different as human beings. We all have different personalities and we all have different values. But when you experience a crisis, you have to make it define you in a good way and change your life for the better, okay? Now, I can go into great detail about different examples of different, types of crises, I'm not even sure about that one. Different types of crises that you can encounter, but at the end of the day, that's not what this video is about. I'm not going to give you an example of a crisis because it can be totally irrelevant to you, or I might say something that jives with you, but it's completely irrelevant to someone else. So the point of this is to tell you what to do. First, when you encounter a crisis, you have to think, number one, why did this happen? So you're looking at what did you do to either make it happen, or what did you not do to not prevent it from happening? How have you affected this crisis? And sometimes your answer is nothing. Sometimes there are completely external factors and it's 0%, like 0% in your hands, and a crisis happens and you just happen to be involved in it. Like if you're just sitting right here, if I'm just pulled over on the side of the road and someone just rear ends me for no reason, there's almost nothing that I could have done other than completely look in my rearview mirror and maybe try and quickly put the car into drive and drive. And even then, there's a very slim chance that I will even come close to avoiding it, because it takes so much time and the car is driving fast. Sometimes it's just not in your control. But what can you do to grow from the crisis? So figure out what you could have done to avoid it, or what you did to actually contribute to it happening. And then once you've done that, think about how can you grow from this situation. So like, let's say if that happened, if I was sitting here pulled over on the side of the road making this video and a car happened to rear end me, well, maybe I'm going to be filming in parking lots instead of on the road. Maybe I'll be reversed into a parking spot, so pretty much I can't be rear-ended in that situation. Or if I happen to need to film on a road, I'm gonna pick a side street of a side street of a side street that never gets any traffic, and I'm gonna occasionally check my rearview mirror, which I'm doing now because subconsciously I'm trying to avoid that potential crisis that might happen. And when it happens, you have to grow from it. So maybe it's filming my videos in a different situation and putting myself not in jeopardy of that ever happening again. Whatever the crisis is in your life, it will either hinder you, and if you let it hinder you, if you experience a crisis and you let it hinder you, like I'm not going to go over examples. I don't want to pick different examples that might affect different people in different ways. But if you let it hinder you, your life is going to suck for the most part. I hate to be a downer about this, but if you let a crisis affect you in a negative way, then you're going to experience another crisis down the line, whether it's a week later or a year later or 10 years later. You're going to experience another crisis, and you're going to be in a habit of letting the crisis affect you negatively, and your life will suck because crisis after crisis after crisis, you're not going to know how to handle them, and your life is going to suffer. And you know what? 20 years later, 50 years later, when you've gone through 10, 15 different versions of a crisis, you're not going to like your life. It's as simple as that. So I'm telling you to make it define you in a positive way instead. Whatever you can take from that crisis, if it's a little tidbit of information or if it's a total different way of living your life, take it and run with it and let that crisis define you in a positive way. Grow from it. Figure out how you're going to live your life better. If you, for instance, I'm just going to go over maybe one quick example. If you struggle with your weight and you see that someone else has experienced something super negative in their life because they are overweight, don't let that crisis scare you in the sense of like putting you into like a deep down state where you're not happy and you're going to eat out of your sadness. Let it define you, okay? Let it change your ways. Let it make you grow from it and then cause you to accelerate your weight loss journey. You know what, let's just go over some other examples. Hopefully you're learning from it instead of letting it affect you in a negative way when I say these things. If you struggle with finances and a friend of yours loses their house because they've also struggled with finances, instead of worrying and then letting that cause you to like lose your job because you're so scared and cause you to lose your clients, instead of letting it affect you in a negative way, get out there, work 22 hours a day for a week, and grind away and start your online business that you've always wanted to start. Make those sales that you've never been able to make and let it define you in a positive way. If you've always been self-conscious about something like losing your hair and it's always bothered you, and your other friend who's bald just lost his girlfriend or his wife or whatever the case is because she found a guy who has a full head of hair, and you're concerned about your relationship, don't let it affect you in a negative way. Don't go home and be rude or mean to your girlfriend or your wife or whatever the case is because you're now concerned about your self-consciousness about not having hair and them leaving you. Instead, go home and be the best person that you could ever be to ensure that they will love you for all of time, okay? You have to let a crisis define you. And like I said, some of you might be thinking like, oh, losing your hair, that's not a crisis. And that might not be a crisis for you, but that might be a crisis for someone else. For the 18-year-old, the 19-year-old, the 20-year-old, because that's basically when I started seriously losing my hair. For the 20-year-old, it might be a crisis. And they might be worried about their entire life because they're losing their hair. Meanwhile, you know, their weight, they might not be concerned that they're 30 pounds overweight, but you might be. So a crisis is different for everyone, but you have to make the crisis define you and grow from the crisis. And it's as simple as that. If you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down below as a comment. Have you experienced a crisis before? How have you grown from that crisis? Let me know down below as a comment. And of course, be sure to subscribe for more great videos just like this one. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.